Okay, so you know when like you're trying to really focus on something and it feels like everything is out to get you, distraction-wise?
Uh,
I
yeah.
swear I spent like 20 minutes last week just trying to pick the perfect Spotify playlist for deep work instead of, actually doing work.
It's like this constant like tug of war for your
Like,
attention.
dude,
Right. And it's exactly why we're diving into Deep Work by Cal Newport.
yeah,
We're going to try to give you the key takeaways from these two summaries you've sent.
yeah.
So you can actually like, get some focus back and get some meaningful work done.
It's like a cheat sheet for getting stuff
Yes.
done.
Yeah.
So, okay, Cal Newport, he says that deep work is this like superpower, right?
Yeah.
Especially in this world of just endless distractions.
Mm.
But what is it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's basically like those blocks of time where you are just like head down, totally focused in on a task. Like nothing else exists in the world except for what you are working on in that moment. And it's demanding, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not an easy thing.
Yeah.
But it's in those moments that the magic really happens, right? You have breakthroughs, you get insights. That's where you can produce really high quality work that makes a difference.
It's being in the zone, right? Where you like
Mhm.
lose track of time because you're so engrossed in what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, totally. And like Newport, he contrasts that with what he calls shallow work, which is kind of like, all that stuff like the emails and the scrolling, like all those little things that kind of just like break up your attention. And you might feel busy, but are you really getting anything done?
Right, right. It's so easy to fall into that trap
Totally.
where you just feel like, oh, I'm so exhausted, but like, did you really do anything?
You just feel behind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So how do we actually tap into this deep work superpower? Because he gives us 4 rules, right?
He does, yeah.
And I want to get into especially this first one. It's work deeply, which seems obvious.
Right.
But he's saying it's more than just like finding the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about being intentional, right? Like
Yeah.
actually creating an environment and a mindset that's actually conducive to doing deep work.
Okay.
It's like, think about an athlete who's training for a marathon, right?
Yeah.
They don't just like run whenever they feel like it. They have a plan. They have a place that they go. They have like rituals that get them in the zone.
Mhm.
So it's like, instead of just squeezing it in when we can, it's about making it a priority,
Mm-hmm.
like a ritual.
Totally.
So what would that look like practically for somebody listening?
I mean, it could be as simple as like designating like even a certain time every day, like, okay, this is my deep work time. Maybe it's early in the morning.
Okay.
Maybe it's, right before I go to bed. Or it's like finding a certain place that you go. Like maybe it's, a coffee shop or a certain corner in your house or in your apartment,
Yeah.
but just having that consistent place where, that's where you go to do this.
And having that ritual.
Putting on your headphones or lighting a candle or whatever it is to signal to your brain, like, it's go time.
Totally. Those cues, it makes such a big difference. And it minimizes distractions because your brain's not looking for them. Now, this next one might be kind of counterintuitive, especially in our like I need it now kind of world.
Okay.
But rule number 2 is embrace boredom.
Oh, see, this is the one where I'm just like, ugh, really?
Hmm?
Because we're so overstimulated all the time.
All the time.
So to actually like be like, no,
Yeah.
I'm seeking out boredom.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's so counterintuitive, but our brains are literally wired to like crave that novelty and stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
So when we just give into it all the time, we're actually weakening our ability to focus deeply.
So we're addicted to distraction.
Pretty much, yeah, I would say so. Like we are so used to having that like instant gratification, and like when we don't have it, it's like, what do we do?
Yeah.
But it's like anything, like if you can build up your tolerance for that discomfort,
Yeah.
in this case, it's boredom.
So how do we actually do that? Because I'm just imagining like staring at a blank wall being like, I'm so bored. I'm so bored.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem productive either.
No, and that's not what he's saying. He's not saying to like completely deprive yourself of all stimulation, but he actually recommends that you schedule internet blocks.
Okay.
So like you have designated chunks of time where you're like, okay, this is when I let myself go on a rabbit hole.
Oh, so it's like setting those boundaries.
Yes, exactly.
Like a digital detox, but a little more controlled.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's interesting is by like containing it, right, you're actually kind of reducing its hold on you throughout the day.
Right, right.
Because you're not like, oh, I can't have it. It's more like, oh, it's coming. So
It's like you're building up that mental endurance.
exactly. And then that brings us to rule number 3, which it sounds kind of scary. Quit social media.
I was going to say, I feel like people are like turning off the podcast right now. But okay, so to be fair, he's not saying like delete everything and become a Luddite.
No, not necessarily. It's more, again, it's about that intentionality.
Right.
Like, are you using these things or are they using you?
Right.
Like, he calls it digital minimalism, where it's like, is this actually adding value to my life, or am I just kind of on here, out of habit, or because everybody else is?
Out of FOMO. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, how often are we really using those things for something meaningful?
Yeah.
Versus just to pass the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's about kind of taking back that control.
Yes.
And being really mindful about like what you're consuming.
Yeah.
Both like digitally and kind of in your real life too, right?
Oh.
And that kind of leads us into rule number 4, which is drain the shallows.
Okay.
So this is about like really like taking back your time and attention.
So how do we practically do that? How do we get rid of all those little like shallow tasks that just seem to like multiply?
Well, he's a big proponent of scheduling.
Yeah.
Meticulously scheduling. And I don't just mean like your meetings, but like your whole day.
Wow.
Like literally planning it out.
This is what I'm doing with this time.
Yeah. So that deep work is not just this like afterthought, right?
Right.
Where it's like, oh, well, if I have time. No, it's like, this is when I'm doing it and it's in the schedule. He's also really big on setting boundaries.
Okay.
Like with your colleagues about availability.
Oh, interesting.
Like having those times where you're like, I'm unavailable because I'm doing this. Or like even having the conversations with your team about like minimizing distractions during certain times.
Oh, that's interesting. Creating a culture of deep work.
Exactly. And then kind of going along with that, like saying no more.
Oh, saying no is so hard.
It is so hard. But we often feel obligated to say yes to like everything.
For our detriment.
Yes, exactly. And we talk about like draining the shallows. It's like all that stuff just sucks it all away.
It does.
It takes it all away from us. So yeah, I mean, he really emphasizes that.
So, okay, does this actually work? I mean, are there people out there who like live by this and are like doing amazing things?
Yes, there are actually. I mean, he gives a lot of examples in the book, but like one that always stood out to me was Carl Jung.
Okay.
The psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
He was so dedicated to deep work that he built a retreat like in Switzerland in the countryside.
Like a whole retreat just for deep work.
Just for deep work. It was totally secluded, no distractions. He would go there for like extended periods of time.
Wow, yeah.
To write, to think. And it was in that space where he produced some of his like most groundbreaking stuff.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like, we're talking like world-renowned psychologist.
This is like next level.
Yeah. But okay, so for somebody who's not maybe at that level yet,
right?
What does it look like?
Well, I mean, one really simple thing is to like actually track your time.
Oh, interesting.
Like actually write down, how are you spending your time?
So you can see where it's going.
Because you might think, oh yeah, I'm spending, a good chunk of my day working. But if you actually track it, you might be surprised.
It's probably more like Instagram than we want to admit.
Probably, yeah. So that can be kind of an eye-opening thing.
Yeah.
To kind of be like, oh, where is it actually going? And then from there, be like, okay, well, how can I adjust? How can I start, maybe even if it's just like 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there, how can I start to reclaim some of that?
So it's about being really honest with ourselves about where it's going and making those small changes. Small changes.
Because, I mean, the great thing about this is it's like anything else, right? Like, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Consistency is key.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, the more you experience those benefits, that feeling of like, oh, wow, I got so much done, or like, I feel really good about the work I did, or whatever it is, it becomes almost like this,
positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of the key is, starting small. So we've talked a lot about kind of, the what and the why of deep work.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure we bring it back to like you, the listener.
Yes.
Yeah. And how they can kind of like apply this to their own work. I mean, we talked about minimizing distractions,
right.
But like, what can you actually do? Like, what does that look like in your environment maybe?
Yeah. What are some like, I guess, tips that people can actually use?
Well, one thing is being mindful of your workspace. And it doesn't have to be, anything fancy.
Mm-hmm.
But like having a designated workspace, even if it's, a corner of your kitchen table or whatever it is, it makes a difference.
Having that physical separation, I guess,
Yeah.
between work mode and everything else.
Exactly, yeah. And then kind of going back to those rituals we were talking about, like don't underestimate the power of like putting on your headphones, lighting a candle.
Right.
Little things like that that kind of signal to your brain like, okay, it's go time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, what about those times when you're like, you're deep in it, but you just hit a wall?
Yes.
Do you push through or do you like take a break? What do you do?
That is that's where I think a lot of people go wrong because you want to power through,
Right.
but he actually talks a lot about the importance of taking breaks. And I don't mean like going and, scrolling on your phone. I mean like actually stepping away from your work,
Totally.
even for 5-10 minutes.
Reset almost.
Yes, exactly. To reset, like go for a walk,
Yeah.
listen to music, meditate, whatever it is you do.
Yeah.
But kind of just give your brain a break because deep work is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah. It's about working smarter, not harder.
There you go, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think kind of like the last thing I'll say on this is, deep work is not just about getting more done. It's about creating work that matters.
Right.
It's about finding that purpose and fulfillment in what you're doing.
So it's about being aligned with your values, basically.
Yes. And that, I mean, in the world that we live in, that is like
a huge.
That is like a superpower.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you shared these summaries with us about deep work. We went through kind of like the what, the why, the how, but the work starts now for you.
Yes.
So what is one small thing that you can do today to invite a little bit more of that deep work into your life? Maybe it's just putting your phone on, do not disturb. Maybe it's, blocking out 30 minutes in your calendar tomorrow morning to have a totally focused work session. Whatever it is, take that step. Until next time, happy focusing.